Colleen Schmidt here from Divination Counseling Service, here to present the full moon of September 20th, 2021. We're looking at a full moon that takes place at 28 degrees, 13 minutes, Virgo/Pisces, because as we know, full moons are always an opposition between the moon and the sun. Unlike new moons, where they conjunct, and that's the time to begin new things, during the full moon, we tend to reflect on those things that are going on around us. With that said, thank you for watching the video. A big thank you to all of my subscribers. Thank you for helping me build the channel. And if you are not a subscriber, I hope you'll consider becoming one. And also, if you would, please like, share, comment. I'd love to hear from you. So today we're going to begin, as always, with Janus. I'm going to then jump into the solar fire to look at the asteroids as they apply only to the United States, because I'm going to look at the angles. However, I'm going to then quickly move to the Aries point, where, of course, the chart affects everybody all over the world, as does the sun axis. The sun-moon axis affect everybody all over the world. And by the way, it's less than 2 degrees away from the Aries point. So that makes it even more interesting. With that said, let's jump in here and look at the chart from Janus, which will help us to begin this process. Okay, so we're looking at a chart and it's got a Mars rising, okay, an Aries rising, which is, we know, is ruled by Mars. Mars happens to be an out of sign, but still conjuncting the sun. So this chart is going to feature, at least in DC, the 6th house, or the house of health and well-being, the house of service, health, and well-being. And Mars being there means that we could be putting some real action into our health and well-being. It means that we could be very active with regards to service, but it also means that there are going to be some anger issues that people will be contending with during this full moon period. I laugh because this is my second time through it, and we all know that's already true. I did this video once before. So we have the conjunction of Mars, but look at this. The moon is also in a conjunction, though much wider, with our friend Neptune. And Neptune is well placed in the 12th house, by the way. It's compassion and it's sympathy and it's sensitivity. And the sensitivity is conjuncting the moon in the 12th house, which I take to mean that there could be a lot of issues going on with people in the background, because in the 12th house, you're not really sharing your emotions. And it's interesting because you have all these angry people and obviously they're sharing emotions, but I'm going to say the larger part of the population probably isn't sharing how they feel. And there's a lot of concern over a health matter. And there is. So you have that. The other thing that I think the moon is saying is talking about deception, about things that happen in back rooms, about Supreme Courts that do shadow dockets. There's a couple of different ways we can look at this, and they would all be accurate. So again, that's more DC, but no matter where you live, look for people who are compassionate, but maybe are more in the back room. They're not sharing so much how they feel, okay? Or because Neptune and Moon could be in any house, depending on where you are in the world, look then for people, particularly women, who are strongly compassionate, but we'll also look out for people who are being taken advantage of, particularly women again, because that's what happens. Or the fact that all of us will be a little bit more sensitive to our emotions in the next several weeks. Okay? Just like we're angry, we're also really sensitive. So I think that both really apply, and it's really stating that this particular month, it could be our own anger and emotions that really kind of pave our way right now. Okay, moving on. There's a lot of ways to look at this, people, so I'm not going to say too much about it. I do want to point out that Chiron is on the ascendant of the United States chart, which does indicate there could be turning points eventually. It's also indicating from the back room people who don't think they have to follow the rules, okay? Or they can skirt the rules somehow, that they don't really apply to them on some level. So there's look for that, okay? Because I think Aries Chiron is a really strong place for Chiron to be. Actually, I know it's there for a while, and it really is about teaching us and us learning and evolving. And it does indicate turning points. So, Washington may find itself with some turning points this month with that 11 degree um, Aries. By the way, in conjunct perfectly to Venus. Perfectly. Those are in conjuncts because Aries is in conjunct Scorpio. So that's really interesting how turning points could be affecting both relationships or money. And obviously with a pandemic still going on, either one could apply. Certainly would have an effect. So other things that I really looked at, I'm going to start over here because I'm here. Hopefully I won't miss anything. But Venus conjuncts Poseidon. And, I like Poseidon so much. And you're going to find out there's an asteroid, Poseidon, right in the Aries point, as is this one is close to the Aries point. It's 2 minutes out of 1 degree orb. So it's really kind of there. And it's really interesting to show up with Venus because I think of Poseidon as enlightenment and spirituality. Now, I know it's propaganda, so please, we don't want to skip that. Some people are making money on propaganda with that connection. But I also like to think of it as enlightenment. And so are we enlightened more about our finances? Are we more aware of our relationships? I think we are. And I think that COVID could have helped that in a strange way. But I like to look at that as more of an appreciation of one another. So hopefully that can come out like that. The other thing I wanted to look at was this Mercury Zeus, which is very apropos. It is also on the descendant, as is Mars. And it kind of makes me think of news that excites people and some people get angry about and aggressive and act out. Zeus is also guns, explosives, and things of this nature. And I do believe that we're constantly, at least in DC area or in the United States, getting news regarding the January 6th insurrection and the bomber, the pipe bomber, they still haven't found. And now they want to have another one. Now I'm doing this on the 10th. This will actually come out on the 19th. I pre-record a lot of my work. And the 18th will be interesting because that's when they want to rally again the insurrectionists, in other words, the same people in DC. They're prepared for them this time though. So it's really interesting. I'm hoping that we don't hear about guns, but I will be really honest with you. The Aries point is like right in the middle. So I hope nothing happens, but if it does, we will all be aware of it. Okay. The other conjunction that there's a lot of conjunctions I wanted to talk about. Oh, I got to make a correction on this video that was about my last video, which is called Politics, Just the Facts. I made a statement about the South Node. I thought it was the Democrat South Node. No, actually, it's the Sibley chart, the South Node of the Sibley chart. All of us in America are right now under the effects of a South Node. Yeah, because the South Node for the country is right there. See Saturn here at 7 degrees? Oh, yeah, that's right. That's where our South Node is, people. That's pretty interesting that Saturn has oppressing us. And this is things like restrictions and, and I don't care whether it's voting restrictions, abortion restrictions, mask mandates, I don't care what it is. There's a whole lot of that going on right now. I am in favor of the mandates of masks, but I am not in favor of voting restrictions, and I am not in favor of women's rights being affected. So I thought that was really interesting, and I do want to make that correction. I wasn't wrong. I was wrong in what I represented by it. So I wanted to point that out. That's what happens when you work with three charts. So now let me get back where I was. Here's something everybody in the world is feeling. Bad leaders. I'm going to say it just like that. Okay. Now in DC, yes, Joe Biden's numbers are suffering. But we've got bad leaders everywhere here in this country. We've got bad governors. We've got governors that think it's okay if people just die. We've got, they just don't want to take responsibility, I guess. But I know that I just heard complaints about the UK's government recently. I've heard complaints about Australia's government recently. So I just want to say that I know that this is something everybody is been concerned with. Bad leadership. Okay. We have that here. We have the ex-president with his big lie. Okay. So we've got a lot going on here. And by the way, his big lie, all right, this big lie is part of the anger issues, the Zeus issues, the Mercury, Zeus, and then ultimately Mars issues that are going on as well. And then I talked about the oppression of the South Node. So just so much here. And it's also accurate. This could also be bad bosses. This could be the deteriorating health of parents. So there's a lot in this combination. There could be medical breakthroughs because the only time you ever want to see, the only charts that look good with Hades Chronos together are doctors. If a doctor has Sun equals Hades Chronos, he's going to be successful as a doctor. However, the last president had it in his chart and he was not good at his job at all. And I think even the most objective person would admit that. He just didn't have what it takes. And he's also deceptive, which really is not a good thing to have in the leader. So Hades Chronos does represent bad leaders. We're going to be contending with this as a world till 2030. And they just get closer and closer. But until then, we can look forward to a lot of medical breakthroughs. So there's the bright side. So I'm hoping that this is not just bad leaders here in the United States, but I hope it does have something to do with medical and breakthroughs and things of that sort, even if it has to do with the virus and getting more people vaccinated. That would be wonderful. I'd be okay with that. So then moving on, I want to talk about Admetus to the node. So we have Admetus and we have our north node. And Admetus is constriction, it's compression, it's getting to the bottom of the matter. It's basically here it could be fewer connections or compressing your connections. All right. And I think that that's just something I wanted to talk about because it's going to show up with a lot of other things. Like I'll give you an example. It trines Mars, the anger. So it's this restricted element that causes anger, aggression, all of the above. It just makes it easy to get angry. That's that sun connection there, okay? You've got a Volcanus on this. Now, Volcanus is it's actually squaring business or expansion, okay? So there's a lot of pressure to expand. The problem is that we're all still node Admetus. We're all still compressed. So there's this extreme pressure, discomfort, because that's the word I use for inconjunct. And so because of Volcanus, there are issues there as well. Now here, I want to point out that in this chart, and this is one of the ways in which astrologers work, look at all the things at 3 degrees. Okay? 3 degrees, 3 degrees, almost 3 degrees. You see that? So 3 degrees. So that means, 3 degrees, that there's a lot of conversation between them. Okay. This is what's hard to explain to people because, if you're beginning astrology, you're trying to say to yourself, well, what does 3 degrees of Libra have to do with 3 degrees of, or 2 degrees, but it's almost 3 degrees of Leo? Okay. Well, actually, that's a sextile, you see. And then you would think to yourself, well, if it's a sextile, wouldn't it make the energy um, better? No, because Mars tends to be a malefic, which means that Mars is aggression and Mars is anger. And so Mars has an active side to it. It's very active, and it's pressure to take action. Well, it's an opportunity to take action or to be angry. I hope you followed that. Because one of the objectives of me doing this astrology is to teach it. So I want people to learn it. The other thing I was looking at here was the opposition. This is going to show up a lot on the dial. Okay, this conversation that we're having with our friends, which is an opposition. Okay, so there's definitely going to be disruptions in our finances and in our relationships. And I'm going to leave it open-ended like that. It is an opposition. So they're not, how do I put this? They're not necessarily on the same page. That's the best way to look at a struggle like that. So I went through that. I went through those 3 degree marks. I'm going through my notes. Okay. Just to make sure that I want to move on, and I did go through that. I'm just trying to, I did go through I just did it. Yeah, I just did that. Great. Pluto trine Sun. I forgot that one. Let's look at Pluto as it trines the Sun. It's fairly, it's a pretty, when you're talking two slower moving planet, well, actually the Sun isn't slow. The Sun's pretty fast. But in this particular case, because it's Pluto, I would definitely say to you, and it's pretty, let me see if I can get it up there. It's pretty close. Yeah, it's less than 4 degrees. So I did put it on my paper because in the case of the United States, and I'm going to go back to the United States, it's a great example. Here we have a trine. Pluto's tough though. Pluto's another malefic. However, Pluto is also represented in the government house of the government chart. That's how I look at this. And it's in a government energy because that's what Saturn represents. Okay. Saturn is what rules Pluto here. I know I'm getting way ahead of myself here because it's Capricorn. Capricorn rules Saturn. So just so that you're following my lingo. I also look at this as a trine where there are things being set up by the government that is making it easier, well, A, for people to be angry. Now they have a reason to be angry, like they didn't need one. But Pluto is also telling us that the transformations that we need to go through will be enabled through the health and services, through a health situation. And so I take that as to make some of these regulations that the government's making, particularly on the virus, could be very beneficial to us all. And I also think that it is telling you that it makes it easy for even the bad leaders to create their own turning points related to health. And that would be women's reproductive rights. So I could use that configuration in all the above. And that was one of the reasons why it made it into my page. The other thing I wanted to point out here was a lot of arguing and disputes in and within families, groups, and organizations that will be based in health. And I think that we can already say that's happening. All right. That, that Cupido, which represents the group, the party, the community, and then there's struggles with that Mars. And again, that's going to be everybody all over the world. I'm not just taking that in DC's chart. That's just a fact in a new moon chart. But it is about healing. So we struggle with our healing. And the neat thing about a square is that a square just puts a lot of energy there. If anything, it means that there can be some real actions put into groups that ultimately could be healing, even if it's a struggle to get this stuff into place. But it is through squares that we achieve miracles. I'll never forget that somebody told me that. And I think Tracy Marks in her book about squares does say the same thing. So just thought I'd throw that out there because that's really important to know, because a lot of times in astrology, we're always looking for the trines because we think it's going to make everything wonderful. And in actuality, trines can bind you because it just makes the energy just too easy. Okay. Whereas a square, we look at it and we think, oh, that's really bad. No, it means it's a struggle, but it means that headway can be made. So I really do want to point that out. I did go through the Zeus Mercury, and I said about how there's information. It's on the descendant of the DC chart that is going to rile the people. Mercury is with Zeus. But again, remember guns. Remember that Mercury is communicating, and people who think they can carry guns. Now, I don't think that these guys are going to be able to get into DC with a gun, because I believe that DC has gun restrictions. Like, in other words, you can't open carry in DC. I'm not even sure you can have a gun in DC. I think you can have one registered, but I don't think you can walk around with it. So I do think that's another thing that, you have to look at from place to place is gun laws. And as a matter of fact, I do, because would not, how do I put this? I don't see myself going to a place where I see guns everywhere. I get the heebie-jeebies if somebody's sitting in a Burger King, and this has happened already, and they just kind of go for something in their pocket, and then you see a gun there. That gives me the heebie-jeebies. I usually leave. I mean, I'm sure they won't use it, but it's not comfortable to me at all on any level. And maybe it's because of where I grew up and the way I grew up. But the whole Zeus thing in the United States, I don't think that the gun issue is an issue in any other country but this one. But since Zeus is there and it is Mercury, I do worry about explosions, bombings, and things in Afghanistan. I really do. Okay. So remember, this is also a world chart. And I did talk about Poseidon Venus. That was one of my first ones. So we got that. The Sun Venus equal node. I believe, okay, let me see this a minute. I believe we have to, when they put these together, they equal that. But I think we have to do that on a dial. So I think I'm now moving into my dial. So let's move into my dial. But I did forget that we're actually still wanting to look at the asteroids for Washington, D.C., because as I said, I did one of these already. I'm not sending it out because it was too long, so I'm redoing it, trying to cut out some of my extraneous speaking. I just want to look at this because DC is going through this whole thing where these horrible governors, I'm going to use my astrology, are doing things against women. They're creating changes and turning points for women regarding reproductive rights. Now, Hecate rules life and death, okay? And so I wanted to talk about that because it's Mac on that's right there on the ascendant, okay? So I thought, oh my God, we must talk about that. Now, Lilith is also about decisions. So it's not just, we're not going to just talk about women's rights and women's things, but what we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about the decisions, and we're going to talk about the turning points, but we got to talk about, because Hecate is also intuitive. It's also listening to your gut, literally. So there's a lot of things with it, but let's use these words, okay? Gender issues. I definitely think people who want to take the rights away from women have a problem with women. I really do. And if you're a woman who wants to take the rights away from other women, shame on you. That's all I have to say. But look at that. Gender issues regarding life and death and birth, how it's revolving around bad leaders. Okay, I think that's because they want to somehow, come out on top on this. Hold on one moment. I gotta get something. So sorry about that. Cats playing. I thought somebody was delivering something, and no, it's two cats jumping on each other. They're lively here. Anyway, just like looking at that, I was so blown away by that. Now you have to look at the other side. Okay. So these are all in conversation. And by the way, that Hades Chronos is really there. Let me stay here for a minute. Look at Hades Chronos and how it's affecting motherhood. Ceres is the mother of Persephone. Okay. It means a lot in astrology about taking care of yourself. It's meals. It's a lot of things. Okay. So be aware if, don't eat bad food right now. Make sure your food is fresh because it is close to Hades. And that's one of the things that we always say when those two are together. Okay. Now it's still about 4 degrees, 5 degrees away, but something we might look out for. Doo-doo is there. So you've got Hades, Chronos, doo-doo, and technically, I want to call it motherhood, is being restricted. In other words, they're putting restrictions on moms. It's unbelievable. Not all the women who have abortions are single. Some of them are having abortions because they already have children at home, and they know that if they brought another child into the home, the quality or the standard of living would be totally affected. It happens. It's the way it is. Or their other children are pretty much grown, and mom would be stuck starting all over again. I'm so happy that a lot of women are beginning to share their stories about abortions, because I don't think anyone has a right to judge one way or the other. I really don't. And I don't think even those pro-life women have a right to tell other women how to live their lives. I just don't. But interesting that it's right there in the chart. It psyched me up so much when I saw it. I was like, ah, okay, so look at that. Okay. Then we're going to jump over here where there's a lot of strategy. Okay. Hypatia is also about illnesses and medical matters. And I like the fact that Hypatia is on one end, and on the other side of this, you've got, it starts with Atlantis. That's what that square box with the two ears is. Okay. Now, Atlantis has several meanings, one of which is privacy, our right to privacy, and how some of these health things, particularly that are being done by these people, are really none of their business. HIPAA laws. You're sending vigilantes, and by the way, look at this, hunter prey. Okay, that's on another angle. So in DC's chart, that's why I wanted to talk about these asteroids. It's also a great way to learn asteroids. You're looking at people who are hunting people, which is an invasion of their privacy and their health. They're called HIPAA laws. So if you're somebody who is not from this country, here in this country, we have what's called HIPAA laws. And in the HIPAA laws, it is a medical law that your medical records are private. That anything that goes on in your body is your business. Now what they're doing, I don't know how they're going to get away with it, because I thought we had HIPAA laws. Well, as soon as I heard about the vigilantes being able to report these women, these mothers, it's a gender issue. Would you do it to a man? See, I always one of my favorite things, I was a dance teacher. I raised a daughter. And I often will say, if somebody says something to you that you don't think they would say to a man, ask them, would you say this to a man? Would you do this to a man? I don't think so. So it does come down to gender biases, and it comes down to a woman's health. And it's so interesting. Well, there's a lot of strategies and scheming and a lot of surprises. I think this is going to go both ways, but I think that I'm going to wait till the next new moon chart to make that, that kind of comment, because this is a reflective chart. And I can tell you that when the news hit, it was a shocker, because we have laws in place that they are blatantly breaking. What's a surprise? I'm not too surprised, but we all should be. Okay? So I got to jump to the dial. I really don't want to take as long. That's one of the reasons I'm redoing the video. Okay. You can see where I was when I left off. Okay. So here we're looking at the Aries point. And I want to point out that the sun and the moon both sit right in within 2 degrees. Okay. So almost any astrology would tell you that sun moon, it's still touching into that Aries point, which means whatever is going on, it's pretty much known in your world. You will know it, no matter where you live, no matter who you are. Now, maybe you won't have the gender issue thing that we're having right now. That's okay. You're still having a lot of what I'm going to be discussing right now. Okay. So I'm going to go with the real Aries point. And in order to expedite this tape, I'm going to expand my Aries point toward where the sun axis is. Okay. So here we're looking at, there we go. So many notes. Here we're looking at Poseidon right here. Now remember, we have this Poseidon, but this is a trans-Neptunian Poseidon. We have a lot of doubles. One of the things I like to do with the dial is point out all of the repeatable themes. So Poseidon is enlightenment. Poseidon is spirituality. Poseidon is people like me, okay? But Poseidon is also propaganda. So all those right-wing news media outlets, all the, made up stuff that's out there on the internet, that's propaganda. So you're going to see both show up in there. And it's really up to us to discern what is what. We're the adults here, so we should do the research. So as I start with, and I have all of this written down. Hold on one moment. I think I'm missing a page. I'm back. So basically, I've got my numbers. I have a whole list of numbers that we want to look at. Okay. So we're going to go and we're looking at from the sun axis, and we're going to look at the Aries point axis. Okay. So we have here Venus, Uranus, which I've already talked about. I also have a Vulcan, Jupiter, which means that all of this pressure can lead to expansion and to healing. So I wanted to point that out. There is still a lot of strategy in this chart, and a lot of things will not be resolved quickly or easily. So I'm just going to, there we are. So this is the sun axis. And what we're going to do is I'm going to do all of the Aries point and the sun in each direction as a way to expedite some time. Okay. So here we're going to start off with Admetus, okay, which is a asteroid. All right. So there's 2 of them. Is with the moon. So you are talking about a populace that is kind of restrained or compressed or in this case, we're kind of restricted a little bit by everything that's going on. And so but there's also this need emotionally to get to the bottom of things. All right. And that is really big right now. And Poseidon is there. So remember that it would go, and for that matter, yeah, just Admetus. I won't go into Brassies. That's a whole other thing. But I will say that, as you're coming and you're crossing into that Aries point, there is enlightenment. So it does go from that restrictive moon position. It's also a good time to go on a diet, though, by the way. It's a great time to go on a diet. If you got an urge to restrict your intake of food, perfect time. And Poseidon is over there, and it would work out really well. Now, the moon and the sun are there because it's the sun and moon together, but I'm looking at a piece of paper that is starting in Pisces. So here we're looking at regulations, and I want to talk about this because this is really interesting. Child is in here with Amor. So some people will have to stand up to their children. It's about boundaries with children, but realize what the mask mandate is asking. Okay. The mask mandate is for children. So that's in here. And that's really, really important too. So I can see a lot of fussing in the home. You're going to find out that Eos and Aurora are both in these axes, and they are confusion and chaos and scattered energy. And let's face it, if kids are going back to school, they tend to be a little bit rough anyway, and then you have to lay the mask on top of that. So there's a lot of households will go through that. I'm not going to add, okay, so Orpheus is there, but it's not really, because Orpheus is rather sad, okay? Now, it is kind of in the sun axis, but that's talking about death and sadness. So we're still dealing in it. We're still reeling from it. And I, hate to talk about it, but it is. I also want to talk about the people who are acting out, the actors, if you will, because they're in there as well. So as I move on and I come down to, and I make sure I got this right. Yeah, this would start about 5:43. Yeah, it starts with the fact that a lot of the confusion is coming through authorities, and it definitely directly connects to the authority. So there's an Eos with a crone. So that's another repeatable theme. There's a lot of, and this could be parents in the home demanding, and that's creating, or it can be somebody at work creating, but the authorities are creating chaos right now. I don't think there's anyone that will disagree with that, by the way. Then I'm going to move down, and we're looking at lies. There are lies abound in this axis, lies in the sun axis. So please be aware of that. There's a lot of lying going on. And you know what's really interesting? Lie is running with risk. So some of these lies are risks. So here's where we get into the fake vaccination cards. This is where we get into people who will lie and say that they are vaccinated when they're not. There will be lies upon lies. So that's going to be really interesting. As we get down, there's also something here about weird drugs, loony drugs. And I'm going to call them what they are because that's what it says. This would be the horse dewormers and all the other loony drugs that are involved in this. And again, this goes back to Chronos. So remember that sometimes it's authority figures themselves that are making these cockamamie claims. Okay. So then I come down, and I do feel as though there's a lot of things that people are trying to make peace with. And it's really hard it's like climbing hill to make peace with a lot of what's going on right now. In other words, I don't know that it's going to happen. I don't know that people can make peace with some of these new law changes. And so they're again creating chaos. So it just goes along with that whole chaos factor. Then we move into where Here we go with that Poseidon concept where we have Delphi. And this is like people who are looking for spiritual awareness, spiritual connections, people who are needing structure, needing to know what the future holds a little bit. And so therefore it's really good for people who do what I do, people who read cards. It's really good for that. And I think it has been good for all of us. A lot of what's going on right now, ironically. See, it's never all bad. The other thing you want to look at here is websites. Okay. Well, I hope this bodes well for the astrology website. And I hope it bodes well for all of the tarot readers out there, because there's a lot of good ones. So it's there, you definitely see that, but you also know that chaos is being connected through this as well. So remember, it's all on the axis, and it is about authorities. So then I go all the way to the end of mutable, and I did get one. And this one is, prior circumstances are what make all this so bad. It's because of what happened prior. It's because of the big lie from the big that came before this president. I'm just going to leave it at that because I don't want to get into some bad language. I'm not a fan of the last president, not even remotely. I don't even have any respect for him. It's sad, but true. It is what it is. But I can tell you that and you got to brace yourself, because again, we're going back to the Zeus in the Aries point, which I just talked about with the guns. Okay. And I will tell you that Zeus equals another chaos over here. And that means explosive natures, guns, all of that stuff. Okay. That's in there, and it's in there creating chaos. And we know that it is. So then we go on, and a couple of the things that I see here. So brace yourself. Brace yourself for the anger of others, because it's in there. It also talks about, as I mentioned, Zeus, but Zeus is running with Libitina, which means there's going to be tears. Some of these things are going to bring about tears. They're going to bring about, I think, not good stuff. I watch out for the guns. Berners-Lee says that a lot of this stuff, that the messages that are getting out are going to be through, they're going to be through websites. For real. And the irony of ironies is, why God me, when the whole thing comes down? We are going to ask ourselves that. So then I move on, and I'm looking at, as I mentioned before, Poseidon, and Poseidon's running with Arachne. Arachne is intrigue. It's complications. It's also the internet. Okay. And it's running with Poseidon. So as we learn things, it gets more complicated, but also the complication could be coming through misinformation or disinformation that's available to us on the computer. The next thing that we're looking at is faulty perceptions that bring trouble, that cause blame. That, in other words, faulty perceptions is also with blame, which means that we might be blaming some of the wrong things. We have to look at that. Okay. Faulty perceptions is everybody all over the world, and blame is in this axis connecting to this. So watch out who and what you blame. Okay? For anything, for anybody, for anywhere in the world. We have to think about our own faulty perceptions, because in the end, what's to blame is misinformation, disinformation, and above all, faulty perceptions. Okay? So as I move on, and I am moving on, okay? Yeah, it's just amazing. I just look at things and I'm shocked. Eros. And I think that Eros, do you know what this means, this right here? This is women's reproductive rights. It's also heart and cardiac issues, which, by the way, people are suffering because they can't get into hospitals to get procedures done because of COVID. Hold on. So sorry, the sirens, I don't think that you all hear them, but I do, and it's very distracting. So as we finish this up, okay, we are looking, it's credibility that everybody wants to look at, credibility. And you know, when it comes to women's reproductive rights, you can't put the basis on the heartbeat because that's not the life. Life doesn't come till breath. And that's in the Bible. That's how we study astrology. I've always known that life begins with first breath. And as a yogi, the present and breath, particularly the present being a gift from God, but also the biggest gift from God is breath. So you can't possibly equate living things with a 6 week old fetal matter, which is only building its heart. It's not even the heartbeat yet. It's just the matter that's building to create the heart. So once again, we have people not listening to science. I just had to point that out. Okay. So as you move on and you see here that basically what they're saying is that Zeus is not just the trans-Neptunian that's here, but down here. See that rallying up of people? That's a repeatable theme. We've got Zeus in the Aries point twice, okay? But remember I told you Just Rewards was also there, and a little too little and a little too late is also there. So I think we can equate that to a lot of different things. I don't think I have to cite a lot of examples in that particular case. And that, let me just make sure. Yep. There's still a lot of missing information. I'm going to leave you with that. That's the last asteroid, Calypso. There's a lot of missing information still. So whether it's related to these new laws they're trying to put into place, or if it's related to the illness that we're all going through, I think that there's still a lot of missing information. And that's one of the reasons why blame, even though it's kind of there, it's kind of not. That's why I want to put it in, but I don't really want to put it in because it's in, but it's only in by a little, or it's only touching. Blame is going to be tough when you don't have all the information. So I'm going to leave you with, please take care of yourself, stay healthy. And until we meet again, I wish you only happy readings.